ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Sarah Davis lives for adventure. She's ridden on horseback through the Namibian desert, hiked to Annapurna Base Camp in Nepal. In 2019, Sarah became the first female to lead an expedition paddling down the Nile, traversing part of the African continent. She came face to face with angry hippos, was detained for crossing a border without a visa, accidentally, and spent a night on a tiny island under armed police guard. If that wasn't enough, when she returned to Australia, Sarah was back on the water within months to tackle Australia's longest river, the Murray. Sarah has written about her adventures in her book Paddle the Nile, One Woman's Search for a Life Less Ordinary. Sarah, hello. Welcome to Conversations.
Oh, hi, Sally. Thank you.
Sarah, you grew up in England and spent quite a bit of time on the coast. How important is that as a childhood memory for you, being by the beach?
It's such a big part of my childhood and the memories, like the real happy memories I have of just playing at the beach, in the water, on the wet sands, or going windsurfing. It's just like, that's how I spent my summers as a family. We had a couple of beach huts down there near the very pebbly beaches, and we'd just spend all our time there, and I loved it.
And what about on the water? How were you getting around? What kind of activities were you doing?
From the age of 12, I started windsurfing, so I loved doing that. Obviously, sort of being quite small, it was slightly limited as to what winds I could go out in. But yeah, would often go out. I loved being out on the windsurf. It was so much fun.
What did the coast look like where you were?
Look, to me, growing up, I loved it. You know, you have the pebbly beaches and the groins and the ocean there, or the sea. Obviously, I got a new appreciation of what nice beaches are when I came to Australia. My perspective has changed quite a lot. I've upgraded, and now it takes a lot more for it to cut. Like, yeah, that's a good beach. But for me, it was all I knew really, other than the holidays we went on, and I loved it.
Some people are comfortable in the water, Sarah, and some are not. Where were you?
Always pretty comfortable. Like, it was. I think, my grandmother would take me out in the slightly bigger waves and things like that, but it just always made to feel safe. And so, growing up, I never had any real sort of fears, but I was always careful. Like, if I went windsurfing, be looking at, is it an offshore wind? Like, what's it doing? Is it safe? So there's that sort of little risk manager in me, I think, even at that age.
Were you a fearless kid?
No, but was always... Like, Mum always encouraged me to try different sports, and as a result, I tried lots of new things. So I wasn't afraid of trying things, but I definitely wasn't fearless by any stretch of the imagination.
I wanted to ask you about your mum, Sarah. What sort of influence was she on you, particularly trying out new things and pushing the boundaries a little bit?
From that, like, trying new things and just always encouraging that, just set this... sort of like confidence just to try new things and be curious and follow my curiosity. And she also had a real love of travel. And when she was in, I think it would have been probably her early 20s, late teens, went travelling around Europe for 6 months with a girlfriend. And that was a time where it wasn't like the rite of passage it is now. And then in her sort of mid-20s went to South Africa. Some friends of hers had gone out there, and she lived out there for a couple of years. And I used to pore over her albums and loved hearing all the stories about the snakes and the spiders and all of those things. And I think, it was a combination of that love of travel and adventure and trying things just really set that up to be very much part of who I am.
And it was possible.
Yes, absolutely. And to just, not to be afraid of not knowing how, because it's like, okay, you can work it out and you can learn.
Sometimes our parents are trying to rein us in, but it's kind of lovely she was opening the world for you a little bit.
Totally. Mum's never held me back, has always encouraged me to go at it and try different things. And if it's something I really enjoy and want to do, then she'd, support me 100%. And obviously it's been hard as well, because me going and doing that has meant I've left the UK. I've come out here and I've gone on these crazy adventures. But as hard as it's been, Mum's always, I think, trusted me to do the right thing, and if it's something I really want to do, she'd always back me, and she's never tried to stop me, and I'm so grateful for that.
After you finished school, you left the coast for the big smoke to study in London and eventually started working in the bank sector, but you started moving into risk management. What is risk management?
It's all about, looking at what the threats are ahead and potential opportunities as well. I think we always think of it as quite a negative space, but it's maximising potential opportunities and avoiding potential threats that could come up, and recognising what could go wrong. And it's other ways of reducing that happening, or the likelihood or the consequence of it happening, and if not, having an action plan in place to deal with it if it does come up.
Why was banking not for you? I actually can't imagine you in the banking world, but how did you figure that out?
I got into it because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I think I'm still working it out, right? But I'd watched all the films of, the Wolf of Wall Street type films. Obviously, we didn't have that back then. And the dealing was like, well, that looks like fun. And I'm good with numbers. I got science. I got a degree in physiology. And it's like, okay, let's go and do that. And I really enjoyed the environment. I have to say, the dealing room environment back in those days, it was fierce and it was fun, and I loved it, but I wasn't a trader. I wasn't a salesperson. That's when I got into risk, and it worked from my analytical side, and that I talked about that sort of risk manager in me, but it certainly didn't make me come alive. But I stuck with it. It was a good career. I did enjoy it, and I still do enjoy being, part of it, but it was just that still, okay, this isn't quite me.
Why did you decide to make the big move halfway across the world to Australia?
I spoke to my boss, and we'd come up for my annual review, and he said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I've never been able to say where I'm going to be in 5 years.
It's a terrible question,
It's like, oh my goodness, seriously? I don't know. Hopefully not doing this, but you can't say that in your review, right?
Not here.
Yeah. So he said, look, you could go into the trading side of things, and I'd already sort of parked that as an idea in the area that I was covering, and it wasn't the time to go into credit trading. He said, look, I was working at National Australia Bank, and he said, well, alternatively, you could look at moving somewhere else geographically. And I was like, okay, I'm interested in that. And he said, okay, Australia. And at first I hesitated because, it's like, this is going to be for 2 years. And I'd never been here. I didn't know anyone here. And it just felt like a really big move. And it was only when a friend of mine turned around and said, but if you don't like it, you could leave after 6 months. And it was like, oh, yeah, it was just so I'm just naturally quite compliant. It's like, but I have to go for 2 years. And then it was like, no, I don't have to. And it was like, yeah, okay, this would be fantastic. This would be a great adventure.
You eventually found your way to Sydney. What was it like starting off in the city of Sydney, not really knowing many people?
Well, I did my first 3 years down in Melbourne and, built up my friends and everything there. And then, after 3 years, it was a move up to Sydney. And I found it a harder market to crack to make friends. And that was when I joined North Bondi Surf Club, because I just thought, look, this could be a really nice way of meeting like-minded people, learning new skills, and actually doing some giving back to the community. And it was, it ticked all those boxes big time and just gave me so much more.
What sort of sense of community did you get from being in the surf club?
It was huge. I'd never expected to be living in a capital type city and to feel part of the community. I'd spent time in London and near Brighton, and you never really feel I'd never felt part of community there. And then suddenly, because through the surf club, you meet everyone through every part of the local community. Otherwise you're just going into the bank and you're meeting bankers and lawyers. It's a very slim section of sort of society, whereas here you're meeting everyone. So suddenly when you're walking around, you know the policeman, the fireys, the local person in the shops. And so you just feel that part of community. And then because you are doing something that's, giving back and supporting the community, again, it just helps make you feel part of it and having that sense of belonging. And when you are away from your family, like having that sense of belonging is so important. And it really the surf club became my family away from home.
You set off on the mission to get your bronze medallion, which is no small thing to do. How hard was it initially, Sarah?
I found it really hard because, I'd grown up on a non-surf beach. And they'd said to us, this is going to be hard for you. You're not a surfer. You haven't grown up in those conditions. But I really wanted to do it. And all the like the dry stuff, the first aid, the CPR radios, that was all fine, but found it very challenging in the surf. And I got to the point, like they were pushing us to go out in reasonable surf because it's like, well, there's no point in being really good at everything else if you can't get out there and save the people. And I got to the point going, I just don't think I can do this. And I spoke to one of my bronze instructors, Debbie, and said, look, I just don't think this is going to be, I'm not good enough. And she said, no, you are. We're pushing you guys and just keep going with it. And it just made it so much more meaningful when I just remember getting my, red and yellow uniform and the quarter cap. And it was very exciting and it meant a lot to me.
Did you have to carry out many rescues at North Bondi?
Look, personally, I haven't. I know a lot of people have. I haven't done a lot. There's definitely been a few, but not a huge amount.
Were you frightened the first time you were out in the surf, the big surf?
Yeah. With the board. Like, I didn't mind the swimming, but with the board, it just felt like, really worried I'm going to do more damage than good here. So it took a bit of getting used to.
Being at Bondi, what are some of the sports that you started to become exposed to on the water there in terms of paddling?
Well, it started off with getting into the competition. I was encouraged by a couple of other people there and started board paddling for the racing board paddling, and then the swimming in the life-saving competition and soft sand running. And did that for a little while and did like Coolangatta Gold in a team where I did the board leg, and I'd watch these people going out on skis and just never thought that would be something I'd be able to do. And then again, it was just something, oh, look, why don't you try this ski? And took it out and it's like, oh, okay, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And that was when I started getting into paddling.
So some of that stuff that happened on the beach in the UK of giving things a go in the water then happened again.
Totally. It was very much, part of that. Yeah, okay, I'll try it. Why not? What have you got to lose?
Why did paddling suit you, do you think?
There's just something about being out on the water, that sense of freedom and space, and there's just that beautiful rhythm. It took a while. To begin with, it was the most frustrating sport in the world because you just fall in constantly. And it was like, I just want to be able to sit in it and enjoy it. And then when I got to that point of being able to do it, getting out there and watching the sun come up over the horizon, you're out there with dolphins or like now at the moment with whales. It's like, it's just the most incredible playground, and being able to do it just on a ski, we can just go off. It's wonderful.
And you'd had some injuries in terms of trying to be a runner, so you kind of needed something.
Yeah, running had always, not always, but through my late sort of 20s into 30s, I got into the longer distance running and really loved that, and probably defined myself a bit too much as a runner. And then I blew my meniscus, and that was kind of and found out I've got osteoarthritis in my hip from falling off horses as a kid. And I was devastated. Like, I'd go just sort of driving along from Bondi to Bronte and see people running, and knowing that I wasn't going to be able to do that really. And I just, like, tears would just roll down my face. And I knew one door is shut and I knew another one was going to open. It just, it doesn't, like, you want it instantly and it doesn't happen. And I just had to sit to it. And then I started getting more into the ski paddling. And then I realized, okay, there's the ocean ski paddling, the longer distance races, because I'm more of an endurance athlete. And it was life-changing. And it was like, it's the best thing that could have happened. I got to go and compete on surf skis around the world and just have some incredible experiences and meet so many different people. And that was what ultimately led me to then go on these expeditions.
So you started competing even at the international level with the paddling?
At a master's level. Yeah.
There's no shame in that.
Oh, no, I was really proud. Like, I got to have my kind of Olympic moment, on the podium, and the Australian flag going up the national anthem. So, it was incredible. That was up in Hong Kong.
What sense did you get of maybe being able to go further and do things beyond what you thought you could?
For me, a lot of that was having people around that just sort of almost suck you along and open your eyes to what is possible. and things that I'd never thought, I would be able to do. And then having, really good people supporting you. I had, an amazing ski coach, Jim Walker, who took me and turned me into a way better paddler than I could have ever been, otherwise. And having those people around, that's what really made the difference.
So you're settled in Sydney now, you're in the surf club, you're paddling, but you kind of want something more. What were the feelings that you were having of trying to reach for something else or do something else?
It was just this feeling like this isn't it, and I don't know quite what is. I felt like, life was amazing. I had a great job. I was working at Macquarie, and it's like, as jobs go and organisations go, it felt like this is as good as it's going to get. But I felt like the square peg in the round hole, and I was kind of contorting myself into a sort of a shape that fitted in. It was like having a beautiful piece of clothing, but it just didn't quite fit me or quite suit me. And I just, it was a New Year's morning, and I was watching the sun come up, and just, as you do, reflecting. And I just decided, like, no, it's time for change. And I just, as far as I was concerned, I had this blank canvas in front of me, and I just wanted to be a little bit more creative with it and do something different. And I didn't know what it was, but it was at that point I made a decision that, I was looking for more and I needed more.
How did the idea of the Nile come into your head, do you think?
I saw, like, through this process, I did things that I read a book called The Desire Map, which is working at, what are your fundamental needs, and was doing a lot of self-reflection and reading different things and watching different things. And through the process, came across a couple of adventurers who'd gone and done first and these expeditions. And I've always read the books by, explorers and adventurers, but what was very different with them was that they just didn't seem like your normal adventurers, the sort of the Bear Grylls types, or those that you feel have been climbing mountains since they could walk. I could see myself in them, the ordinary people who just had these big goals and backed themselves and went and did it. And so suddenly I could see what I wanted to be. And it's like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to go on a massive adventure and an expedition. And it felt like I was listening to a voice that really had been whispering to me all along. So that was sort of the almost like the hardest part was that realization. Then it was like, okay, what am I going to do? And my ego really liked the idea of a first of some kind. I knew it had to be paddling, so I started looking, has someone gone around Australia? It's like, yep, Freya Hoffmeister had paddled around Australia at that point. And then, okay, what's the longest river? My geography is horrible. And so it was the Nile. I was like, oh my goodness, Africa is my, go-to favourite destination for holidays and adventures. And saw that no woman had done, source to sea paddling. And it was a visceral response of like, this is it.
What happened to your body when that light bulb really went on for you?
It just came alive. It was just like this buzz of, oh my goodness, this is it. That excitement, like deep within, it was the ultimate aha moment.
So when you come up with a big idea for a challenge like that, there are two choices with your friends and family. One is that you keep quiet. The other is that you tell them. If you tell them, you need to make it happen. What did you decide?
Tell them, because I wanted to create that sort of community accountability. I did, a reasonable amount of research first, but it's hard. Like, not many people have done this kind of expedition. And so I did read a couple of books. And then I came across, through those books, one person was mentioned, Pete Meredith, who has been on and supported a number of river-based expeditions through Africa. And so I reached out to him, and he was great. He gave me some time. So he then gave me all the things I needed to consider, and basically like the skeleton of the project plan of these are all the kind of areas I need to think of, from the engaging governments through to when to go, through to equipment and skills and everything else. And then sort of more research. And then, when I had that trip to go to Namibia, riding across the desert, tacked on a trip to go up to Uganda to actually, because I thought, before I fully commit to this, I should probably go and look at the Nile. And so I went there and I did 4 or 5 days of whitewater kayaking and speaking to people locally. And it was that was like, okay, I'm committing to do this. And then after a little bit more organising and getting things, my ducks lined up, I remember literally spending an hour with my finger over the post button on Facebook before I fully announced it, of this was what I was going to attempt to do. It just felt like I was really putting myself out there, you know, and that kind of feeling quite sort of vulnerable with it, but knowing that, yeah, no, I've got to do this.
And when we're talking about the Nile, we're talking more than 6,500 kilometres, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the source of the Nile is still debated, but from the source that I chose in Rwanda to Egypt, it was potentially going to be, over 6,500 Ks.
So the organisation, you have to plan out where you're going to start and how that you'll do it. How complicated was the preparation? Very. It was, and when I was coming from a point of having never done anything like this, so there was a lot to learn about. You know, it's something relatively simple. Okay, I need a satellite phone. Well, I knew nothing about satellite phones. So then you start researching. So, there's different sets of satellites. Well, you need to check your coverage. Okay, the handsets are totally different to a mobile. There's different functionalities and things that you want. Totally different providers, different plans. So you've got to, there's this huge learning piece before you can even make a decision. But at the same time, while it was incredibly time-consuming, it was also really rewarding because it was this feeling of learning new things and progressing towards a goal. I mean, there were times, yes, it did feel like I wasn't making progress. But then I'd look back and sort of go, okay, how far have I come? And I'd look at what I'd done in the last week or month or how far I'd come. And it was like, okay, no, I'm making progress. So it was 2 years to organise, though. That's a huge amount of organisation. I was working full-time, but then I ended up cutting to 4 days a week because I just didn't have enough time. What about the political logistics? It was always like trying to line that up through, 6 countries in Africa is always going to be challenging. And that's what meant that at the time, South Sudan was still going through a lot of internal conflict. I knew getting north of Juba, the capital, was going to be unlikely, but I really had hoped to get to Juba. But it's out of your control. You just like, well, what's the most I can do of this? And that's what I realised coming into it. And, yes, there were firsts off the back of it, but it very quickly, it wasn't all ego-led. It was far more intrinsic sort of motivation because it would need to be for something like that. What about the physical training? What were your thoughts on how you needed to get your body ready? I focused a lot on strength work in the gym and building muscle. I knew I maintained a good base with my paddling, and I had a really strong base from doing World Champs, and then I'd done Molokai. And I just felt the risk of overuse injuries and the fact that I would probably, atrophy or catabolise muscle as I went, actually building that muscle. So you'd lose muscle. But... Yeah. And plus I was going to be spending the first few months rafting, 2 months or so rafting. So I was going to be sitting in a kayak. So there's no point in, spending 10 hours a day in a kayak. And because it wasn't a race as well, I knew I would adapt on the expedition. How handy were those risk management skills in trying to pull this whole thing together? My risk register. It was a piece of work. It was awesome. What's a risk register? Going through and working out everything that could go wrong. So and it was also really interesting having, I've done risk management in a business sense and suddenly trying to apply those skills for a personal project. I mean, one made it, it's very satisfying. But it's like, where do I start? So I just broke it down into 5 categories of all the illnesses and injuries and then all the people-related incidents. So everything from, approvals not being given through to more hostile situations, all the wildlife potential risks there, of which there were plenty and all quite terrifying. Then the risk to key equipment and then the environmental risks of rapids, heat, cold, storms, everything else. So then breaking those down and go, okay, what are all the injuries and what are all the illnesses? And then what can I do to reduce that? What vaccinations do I need? What meds do I take with me? And then doing the training, for me, it really helped fuel a lot of my preparations because then it was like, okay, I need to potentially do some self-defense work. So I did Krav Maga, which I loved. What's that? It's self-defense training, so developed by the Israeli Defense Force, just a form of self-defense. So I did that for months. I did remote first aid, wilderness survival, hostile environment awareness training. And
as I was going through, looking at all the risks, the risk of arrest or unlawful arrest, it was high enough that I felt I needed to have a plan there. But there's no standard operating procedures for what to do if you get arrested. And I didn't want to put it, I had a team of people ready to support me, had financial power of attorney and things like that. I didn't want to put that on them. So then I decided to engage the company that actually did my hostile environment awareness training, which is all about, looking at what could go wrong in the countries that you're going through. And so I had an operator who I would check in with daily, who would give me detailed intel reports for the section I had coming up. They also had a cyber team, so they were looking at people who were following me on social media, keeping an eye out on dark web chat rooms and things like that for any potential threats there, which there were some sort of during the expedition. But yeah, so for me, the risk management, it brought that whole thing where I'd always seen it as a bit dry and boring. It really brought it to life. And it was so valuable. And it was valuable also for unpacking some of the fears, because, there was so much that terrified me. But by realising, the likelihood and the impact and how I could reduce the risk and action plans in place, it created those boundaries of what I was getting into and the confidence, like, okay, I'm willing to take this on.
Broadcast. Podcast. This is Conversations with Sally Sarah. Find more conversations anytime on the ABC Listen app, or go to abc.net.au/conversations.
Sarah, what were you most afraid of when you arrived in Rwanda, getting ready to start this journey?
I think the biggest fear was dealing with the rapids and dealing with the wildlife. Those are probably the two things that really did worry me the most. Even when I got to Africa, I still didn't have my team, because as much as I tried to find the right people, I hadn't been able to. I still didn't have all the approvals. It all came together quite quickly, then got to the source. So then it all felt quite rushed, and we had so many problems getting to the source. We had all these car problems, and then suddenly you're there and on the river, and it's just like, oh my goodness, there's so much that could go wrong. And I just felt like all the gear and no idea. And, you sort of got this Rolodex in your mind thinking about, what have I not thought of? What have I not got with me? What have I not tested? But then it's just like, okay, you just got to roll with it and take what comes up.
What was it like getting into the water on that first day and heading off?
It was an amazing feeling. We got down, we'd gone to the source on the one day, and then the next day we put in and found a point where the river was going to be wide enough to put the raft on. And coming into it, I was still really apprehensive. But that moment when I saw the Nile and I saw the point that we were getting to was going to be fine to put in, it was just like all that apprehension just melted away. And it was, wow, this is it. It's happening. The 2 years of getting to this point, and, we spent the time inflating the raft and putting everything on. Everything had to be tied down. And we launched it, and we had a huge crowd around us, like the locals. It was Umaganda, I hope I said that right, Umaganda Day, which is every third or fourth Saturday in the month.
The clean-up day.
Yeah, the clean-up day, which is why, Rwanda is so beautifully clean, and everyone stops and cleans up or digs ditches or helps build the schools, whatever is needed in the community. So there were lots of people out and about, and they said that this constituted, we're going to say, watching us
staring at you.
And I'm like, I'm not sure about that, but okay, this is a wonderful send-off. And so we had all these people around us, and then, we put the raft on the water, and I just remember that moment of taking that first stroke, and we had all these kids running along the banks, screaming and shouting, and it was just like, it was the most perfect send-off. And this feeling of like, wow, I've actually made this happen. And it may sound crazy, but even if it had just been for one day and it had finished after a day, it would have been enough, because it was just so huge to get to that point and make it happen.
Had you factored in just how much attention you were going to get and how much people were going to stare at you and look at you as you're undertaking this journey?
No, I did not expect this to be anything like as entertaining as people found it to be. It's like, I don't know, this is just someone just going off paddling. But yeah, you know, I know there's one night we stopped and it was raining and it was terrible, and we'd had to portage, like go around this bridge that had sort of collapsed. And it wasn't worth getting back on the river, so we stopped. And it wasn't long before the entire village was surrounding us, and we'd put the raft up against this bamboo to try and act as a bit of a protection from the elements. And I started cooking dinner, which is just some rice, and just had this group just crowded, sort of claustrophobically around us. It was bizarre. And it's like, why are you watching this?
So, Sarah, you had a local team with you, and then on the other end of the sat phone, you had Dave, the security consultant that you'd call into every day?
Yeah, so every day I would message him most of the time. It would just be a text message and give him a rating on a 1 to 5, 1 good, 5 bad, on how I was from a security, health, supplies, mental state and comms basis. And would then give him like what the plan was for the day, and then he would send back a detailed intel report. I mean, depending, if it was just text messages, then it would just be what I needed to know. If I had access to my emails, then I'd get a longer report. And it was amazing. Like, the detail that he had was extraordinary.
So he was a pair of eyes kind of watching over the whole thing.
And also, you know, as someone that I could bounce decisions off, because I've never done anything like this, and there were some fairly big decisions to be made. And so having someone who I absolutely trusted, who, one, I could bounce decisions off with, and two, who I knew would call it if I was being reckless, because I just didn't want to be that sort of adventurer who goes off and then they have to send the cavalry to come and rescue, although they kind of did. But I knew, you know, he would stop me doing something reckless, and because I think we can get very caught up in the goal and that sort of summit fever type thing, and I didn't want that. And he was, it was just having that advice all the way.
You were a few days into the expedition when you encountered some hippos. What happened?
This was on day 6, and up until that point, we'd just been getting into the swing of things. For me, yes, I had to go using all the equipment, but it's very different from when you're actually using it in situ. And us all getting to know each other, or, them getting to know me, and vice versa. And we'd pulled up quite close to Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, and got up the next day, and I just heard this hippo making its way upstream. You could just hear the sort of guffaw of it as it was going past. I was, oh no, okay, well, we've reached hippo territory. So there was a certain tension, like we'd all heard it, we didn't really acknowledge it verbally. Got going, and we came to our first pod of hippos and got around them, and that was fine. There were just a few of them. And then we were coming up, and so the river there, it's not that wide, so maybe, 50, 70 metres wide, very silty, so you certainly can't see what's under the water, short, steep banks and very windy, so again, you can't really see what's ahead. And so the way we were set up, we had someone on the oars, so you had a set of oars and a frame on the inflatable raft, 2 of us up front paddling, and then someone just sitting at the back. And we also had a white water kayak, so that if we did come to rapids, Ko would go and scout the rapids to see if there was a line we could take. But we were all in the raft, and we were coming up to this left and then a right. And as we came up to sort of begin to turn left, we saw this baby hippo pop up in the far corner. And so we stopped rowing and paddling. But of course, the river then's just still taking us. You've got the flow. And I literally just got the words out of, "Where's Mum?" And she pops up on the right, and we've gone between her and her
So
baby.
you're between mum hippo and baby hippo, which is exactly the place you do not
really
want to be.
Don't want to be. It's like, oh, we messed up big time. So she, not surprisingly, wasn't overly impressed with that. She came at us. She put her head under it. It looks as though she tried to flip us. That didn't work. We're still trying to get to the riverbank to get away from her. And then I just remember feeling this tug on the back of the raft. And I looked behind me, and there she was. She'd bitten into the back of the raft. Luckily, she let go. I don't know whether it was the pop, the air. She realised she was a long way from her baby. We were then able to get to the riverbank, get out. She paused. She wasn't coming at us anymore. And then she moved away a little bit, so then we were able to get everything, unload the raft, pull the raft up.
So did it start to sink the raft, or is it compartments?
It's compartments. So it was just that one compartment that went down, thankfully. And there were some local guys who were helping us get all our stuff off. And you had a hole in the raft. It was literally sort of like 40 centimetres long by about 10 centimetres wide.
They're powerful animals, aren't they?
Massively, massively. And at the time, you're so much in, because it's just that real primal, I've got to get away from this. So it's sort of action focused. But what was then terrifying, it's like, because you deal with the situation you're in, but then it's like, well, we've got to get back on the water. And we've got weeks of dealing with this. And that was absolutely terrifying. That was really hard.
And, there's that statistic there that hippos kill more people than lions. They are a real threat if you're in the wrong spot.
Huge threat. So the thought of, getting back on the river, there was a part of me, I did have to check in with myself and go, do I want to continue? And it was as soon as I thought, or do I stop? And again, it was that visceral response of like, no, I want to keep going. And Peter, one of the guides, he was amazing at coming up with alternative solutions in pretty pressurized situations. He just kept so calm under pressure. It's like, oh my goodness, what are you? I want some of that. And he said, okay, what we'd do if we come up against more hippos is, if we can, we stop when we see them, we get off the raft, we get onto the riverbank, and we just tow the raft past. And that really, having that plan helped. And then, just wanting to do this trip was really what got me back on the water. And it was within an hour we came across another hippo. It was a male, and he put on this psychotic display. But we did, we stopped, we got off, and that worked. But we couldn't, we still had a lot of incidents with hippos, none quite as bad. But where we could, we got off, but we couldn't always.
Not all that long after the hippo incident, it's very hard on the river to know exactly where you were. You accidentally crossed the border into Burundi. What happened?
So we were coming up, and the river was going to turn into the Akagera River, and there were multiple channels to choose from. And we were right on the edge of a lake there, which was right on the border with Burundi. Unmarked border, because it's going across this lake. Well, I had my GPS. It didn't show all the channels. Didn't want to have to go down the wrong channel and back paddle in a raft. It's not great. So we asked some local fishermen, and these guys came over. And I was just a bit sus, because the guy in the front of this, it's a dugout canoe. These fishermen are, poor church mice. They've got, holes in their T-shirts. But this guy had like a nice T-shirt on and shorts and a Schmidt kind of haircut. And I just remember looking, oh, that's different. And he said, look, come this way. And in doing so, he actually led us across this unmarked border. And then he said, wait here, I'll call my friends and they'll show you the way. So he put the call in. The next thing we know is this tinny coming across the other side of the lake, submachine gun on the front of it, 3 guys clutching their AK-47s. They were the army, the Burundian army. And they checked our paperwork. We didn't have visas to be in Burundi because there was no plan to be there. So then they told us to row across the lake. So as we were doing that, I then sort of kick off the plan, which was to let Dave know. So I messaged him through the GPS just to let him know what was happening. But then we were led across the lake and we were questioned.
So did they detain you for a while?
Yeah, so the army were quite happy to let us go. I mean, they went through everything. We had to unload the raft to the point that we were opening up, having to show them unopened boxes of matches. Like, they wanted to check everything, I guess, for contraband. And then it was the police. I spoke to the guy in charge of the army. He was like, look, well, you'll be on your way soon. But the local police decided that no, that wasn't what they wanted to do. So we were told to load everything up in the back of a ute, which had sort of the benches on the back. We were then told, right, you're being taken for more questioning. So we were loaded up on the benches on the back of this ute and armed police guard on each corner. And next thing I know, I was like careering through the Burundian countryside to the police station. I just believed this was going to be fine. And we stopped at one point and I said, look, it's getting dark, because it was an hour and a half drive. I said, look, the guys are all going to get cold. Can we get changed? And they said, yeah, fine. And when that was true, but I also knew that I'd be put in a room on my own and I could get another message out to Dave to give him an update on what was happening. So I did, which all felt very exciting and like, yes, getting it done. And then we were off again and then taken for more questioning. And then we were told, right, well, you're being held, but at a hotel. So we were given like a minute to grab our things. And I'd still, they'd taken all our passports, mobile phones, laptops, all of that stuff had gone. But I'd managed to keep sort of hidden on me the satellite phone and the GPS. So I kept that with me and we went to the hotel. I got very excited when I saw a bathroom and then I saw the 15-litre jerry can next to the shower. I was like, oh, okay, we won't be having a shower after all. It was pretty basic. And that night, under sort of cover of darkness, I literally commando crawled out onto the balcony because it was the armed guard across the road, making sure we weren't going to escape. Although, I mean, how far I could get. White woman with no passport, not that much money, quite limited. But anyway, and put a call in to Dave and hearing his voice, that was really reassuring. He was like, look, work's underway to get you out. Just be very compliant, which we were being, and just go with it.
What happened to your gear while you were being detained?
Most of it was fine. So after a couple of days, they agreed that they would release us. It was all very tense. So like getting to the border, it just felt like it could turn very, very quickly. And it was really brought home to me that as we were heading towards the border, a call came in for one of the guys. And then they passed me the phone. I was just like, why are you passing me the phone? It was the British consulate. And one of the first things I said is like, have you been hurt? Have you been threatened? Have you been harmed in any way? And I had a couple of calls with the FCO, the British sort of consulate, and they always asked the same question and did seem surprised when I said no, everything was fine. So then, we got to the other side and we were released. And then as we got going, after a couple of days, started to notice things that had disappeared. The toilet paper had gone, a little bit of meat that we had gone. They tried the tin of baked beans, obviously didn't like that and just left the baked beans oozing in one of the dry bags, which is disgusting. My thongs are gone, the knife off my PFD, my life jacket. So, yeah, it took days for us to realize, hang on, I haven't seen that. Or the code go, so where's the knife on your pier? Oh, yeah, that's cool. But nothing major. Like, my camera and all of that stuff was still there. It was fine.
Those situations when authorities come in, especially in those remote locations, there's some very serious things going on, but sometimes there can be a sense of performance as well. I remember we got detained as a film crew in South Sudan and got told we were being taken to the police commander, our names would be taken, but there was no stationery out there, so all he had to write our names in was a small notebook with a pony on the front of it, like it was a pink little girl. So we were terrified of getting our names taken, but when they were taken, it was like, just in that little notebook, so you never know.
And this is, you don't know, the rules are very, very different, but I don't know, it never felt like a threatening situation. It could have changed quite quickly, obviously, but it never did. And it was, it was a really great, crazy to understand, but a bonding experience for all of us because, when you're dealing with that kind of adversity is very much, it brings you together. And I got to spend time individually chatting to the guys and getting to know them more and getting to know their backstory a bit more. Yeah, we'd had this sort of shared suffering, as it were, which brought us so much closer together as a team when we then did get back on the water.
When you got further along, how did you handle Sudan and South Sudan? Because there's some security issues there.
The intel that came through Dave, or that Dave got, was that the South Sudanese, like the National Intelligence Security Service, were quite sus about me and what I was doing. And I kind of get it. It's a country that's gone through conflict for, as you know, for such a long time. The concept of doing something for sort of fulfillment or whatever, it's like not even on the radar. So it's like there must be an ulterior motive. You're a journalist, you're a spy, there's something here. And the British consulate, when I'd spoken to them, had said, if anything happens in South Sudan, we can't help you. You are on your own. And as much as I hated not being able to do any part of South Sudan, it just felt that was going to be a step too far, and that was sort of getting into that reckless, because being detained, it could be for an hour, it could be for a day, a week, you don't know. And that doesn't just impact me, like the ripple effect from that is family, friends, consulates, the Australian, British government, and then it's the people that want to come after me and do similar things. So I made the call that I would skip South Sudan, and I really hope that one day I can go back there and do South Sudan. So instead, spent Christmas in Uganda. I'd spent so much time there and it was beginning to feel like a second home. Oh, my goodness, I love it. And I'd made such good friends there. I haven't spent quite a lot of time. There was a lot of prep time before and after and between sections. And so I had a lovely Christmas there. And then I flew up to Sudan.
What's the countryside like as you're paddling through Sudan? What's it look like?
Obviously so different. I mean, this was the shame of not going from getting to go through South Sudan, of seeing that sort of slightly more gradual transition. So I went from very, green, lush Uganda to the Sahara and very much flatter. But I loved it, particularly in the section when, we started off down near the South Sudan border and came up to Khartoum. So that was the first stretch. And that was a great little sort of warm-up getting into the way of things and back into kayaking and my body adjusting to that. And then it was like the big section was going from Khartoum up to the border with Egypt. So that was about 1,500 Ks. But then going up through and paddling through the Sahara was just this surreal kind of experience. You're in the biggest hot desert with these dunes at times coming down to the water, but then you're paddling through it. It was beautiful. I love the desert.
The journey continues. You go from Sudan into Egypt. How do the sights around you change as you start paddling along the Nile in Egypt?
It's a lot more built up. I mean, not massively built up, but you've certainly got more buildings, more people, as opposed to being very, very remote. You suddenly didn't feel remote anymore.
What's going through your mind as you're getting days closer to the end of this incredible journey? Were you ready for it to finish, or did you kind of want it to keep going for a while?
There was such mixed emotions. And then when it got to that last day, I woke up that morning just feeling really emotionally wobbly, and I really had to look at myself in the mirror and was like, Sarah, get it together.
In what way? Wobbly how?
Just, I don't know. It was just this almost certainly not mental breakdown, but just that really emotionally wobbly and weak. And it was, I didn't know where it had come from. And I think it was just so close to the finish. It still felt like a mass, even though it was the shortest probably day I'd had for the whole expedition, it felt big. But then when I got down to the river and I saw it, it was a beautiful day and it was sparkling. And I was like, oh no, this is all good. I'm going to bring this one home. And I didn't listen to any music. I literally just took in every paddle, every stroke. And then I could start to smell the sea air, like the Mediterranean.
What was that like?
Like coming home, it was like smelling the sea air. It was like finally some salty water, none of this freshwater rubbish. And then I could see, unfortunately I couldn't make it out to the Med because, well, for one, it was huge surf. And I got to a point and I called it. I was relieved in that day and the next day. It was this real mix of emotions of happy to have finished it and achieved it, relieved also that I was like, no more problem solving, no more dealing with issues. But also there was a grieving. I was, when I saw the Nile, literally as the taxi was taking me to the airport for the last time, tears just erupted. It just from nowhere. And there was a grieving, like the Nile had been my purpose, my life for the last two years of planning and the 6 months I spent on and off the river in Africa. It was sad to be saying goodbye to it.
You were paddling through some very difficult parts of Africa where life for the local people can be really, really hard. How did you get your head around having adventure and seeking hardship through an area where a lot of people have hardship whether they like it or not?
This was one of the reasons why I was raising money for Care International, because it was like going through these countries where people are dealing with such hardship and lack of opportunity, and wanting to raise money and also raise awareness and share some of the stories of the people that I spoke to. And, because you just get this totally different perspective and appreciation for the life, the opportunities that I have. And when you see these people who have got all this potential, but there's just no opportunities there. And it's the heartbreaking stories that you hear.
Does all of that sit comfortably?
Oh, not always. When you're sort of rocking up there and I've got all my gear and I get to choose to go and do this, it felt uncomfortable, definitely, at times. The only way I could try and make it feel a bit better was to try and give back. But, yeah, it sort of just felt unfair.
We've been talking a lot about the magnetism of this sense of adventure. That's what you're going towards, but you're also going away from something, and that was sort of ordinary daily life. What do you think about ordinariness and whether you fit in that or not?
You know, when I came back, it was nice to go back to schedule and routine. And I think, it's enjoying a bit of both, learning to create the purpose in what I have on my everyday life, but then to be ready to know this is then the platform that helps me then go off and go on and do more adventures.
Do you think that restlessness will stay with you?
Yes, I think so. Even if it's, it doesn't always have to be the massive adventures and expeditions, but just that wanting to go and explore and experience different things and meeting different people, getting different perspectives. I'm just drawn to it.
What's the biggest lessons that you took away from the Nile?
Look, there were quite a few lessons, a lot of lessons. I think definitely one was control the controllables. There was so much outside of my control because I could find myself stressing about things that I was stressing about. There were hippos ahead. And it's like, Sarah, you can't change whether there's going to be a hippo around the corner. You've done everything you can to set yourself up for success here with the choice of being in a raft, with the people you have around you, with the plans you've got. Accept it. The importance of, taking risks and finding the right risks to take. Learning to face my fears, the power of purpose. That was a big one. Like, getting back on the river after that hippo attack. It was just wanting this being having such meaning for me, gave me, that bit of courage I needed to get back on the river. So, it's finding that purpose that will drive me to go above and beyond.
It's an interesting relationship between risk manager you and adventurer you. It sounds like you almost have to switch one off sometimes to be able to do the other.
It's true. Definitely. Because one, if risk manager Sarah takes over too much, you don't go anywhere. But it's just that balance and acknowledging. I've learned to accept that. Yeah, it's okay to be afraid and it's just finding those things that I'm willing to push myself beyond, those things that scare me.
What's all this been like for your family, being brought up to enjoy, get out there, try new things and take risks? That can be difficult for a family when you actually go out and do it on this scale. Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I think for Mum, look, she was amazing and she certainly seemed to deal with it pretty well. But it's the, not knowing when she's next going to speak to me. And we'd always finish it. She said, don't ever tell me when you're going to call me next. Just say we'll talk soon. And I, as much as I could, keep her updated with messages and where I am and what I'm doing. And there were times when I couldn't, then Dave would send her a message and let her know what was going on. Yeah, I don't think it was easy.
That's a really generous thing that she did for you when you were little. That's a special kind of love to kind of give your kid that permission to try new things and maybe it might end well or maybe it might not for them.
Oh, it was a gift. It's an absolute gift. And I'm very grateful to her for it.
What's next, Sarah?
So many things I want to do. Look, I've got a long list of adventures. I've stepped back from doing the corporate work and now building my own business. So it's getting that going so that then I can go on more expeditions. So I definitely, there will be more. Watch this space.
Sarah, thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
Sarah Davis was my guest on Conversations today. I'm Sally Sara. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to a podcast of Conversations. For more Conversations interviews, please go to the website abc.net.au/conversations.
Discover more great ABC podcasts, live radio and exclusives on the ABC Listen app.